Welcome to Out of the Darkness. It's what we here at Broadway Media hope will be a very frank discussion, an informative discussion about suicide. I'm Bill Allred from X96, and I want you to know that as you're watching this or listening to this on your various radio stations or watching it on live stream, if you have any comments, please feel free to make them via Facebook, or I think you can make them on the radio station's websites as well. And my co-host right here.
Yeah, I'm John Watkins from Mix 1051, and we're going to have some great guests coming up to talk about suicide and suicide prevention. But first, we got to talk about the numbers. That's where you start.
Utah has the 5th highest suicide rate in the nation.
Over 425 suicides have been confirmed so far this year, and that puts Utah on a pace to break last year's record of 638.
Suicide is the leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24.
The second leading cause of death for ages 25 to 44.
On average, one person dies by suicide every 14 hours in the state of Utah.
And suicide is the 7th leading cause of death overall in Utah.
You know, next Saturday it'll be 9 years since my brother Noel died as a result of suicide. Suicide rates are high in Utah. We know that. We talk about other states and we try to compare them. Why are they so high here in Utah? And there are many theories. It is interesting to note and sad to note that states that have high rates of gun ownership also have high suicide rates by people using guns. Over half of the suicides, and my brother Noel was one of them, over half of the suicides in Utah are as a result of gunshots.
I'll tell you that I'm a new father. I have a son, Liam, who's 5, and a daughter who's 3. And I look at the social media bullying that is going on in this day and age. I read the news stories of suicides occurring younger and younger, and it scares me. It is what keeps me up at night when I watch my kids fall asleep in the evening, and anything we can do to stop this from happening, to save our children's life. That's why it's so important to be here today.
It's a public health issue, really it is. It goes beyond a dirty secret that we have to hide. It's a public health issue, just as we tried to tackle smoking, as we tried to tackle cancer rates. It's the same sort of thing, and we need to talk about it. Now, we took some cameras out on the streets of Salt Lake City, and not all of you will be able to see this, but our panelists will turn around and watch the monitor. We spoke to some people out on the streets of Salt Lake City about suicide, and here's what some of them had to say.
So we wanted to ask you a few questions today, if it's all right, about suicide. And the first thing we wanted to ask was what you think the causes are for these statistics regarding suicide in Utah.
I think suicide is a problem in Utah because it's marriage at the young age. And when the women have to stay home with kids and cannot expose to the outside world, it tends to cause more problem. And when it just feel restricted, so that could be the reason why suicide could be a problem, like most of depressions.
First guess would probably be pills. Something to do with pill epidemic. I don't know. That'd be my first guess.
I think there is like this insane, incredible pressure on kids to be perfect, and not just kids, adults too. And we have kind of a culture of that here, and it's unattainable. And they have nowhere to go because they feel guilty that they feel like that.
I would blame it on the parents. That's me. How they're brought up. And probably the peer pressure that's put on a lot of young kids here in the state, based on the culture.
I think the Utah culture, mostly based on because of the religion. There's a lot of shaming here.
Suicide is just a big problem due to everyone's lifestyles and how everyone treats them, and it pushes people to use Oxy, Adderall, and all that, the depressant pills, and then it drives them more and more, and then they will eventually overdose on worse stuff like heroin, and stuff like that. And I think it's a huge problem actually for Utah.
Why do you think so many people are hesitant to have the conversation about suicide?
We're embarrassed to hit these things head on. And so we don't want to talk to our parents. We don't want to talk to our friends.
Suicide's hard to talk about anyhow, so I can't answer that other than that. I would just say they probably don't talk about it because they don't want to face it.
I don't know why they're not talking about it. It needs to be talked about. I think they're just sort of ashamed, or if it happens in their family, they don't want to admit that their loved one did that.
In Vietnamese, we have a saying like, if thing is not good, you don't want to mention that. And if thing is good, you want to talk about it. So if it's a problem here, it's understandable that people don't want to talk about that very often, especially in the family that grow up with like religious.
People in Utah, a lot of them, they really like to be on their own, really. It's that mindset that the ages like 18 up have. They don't like to open up, especially in high school. Kids don't like to open up to each other unless like you've known them your whole life.
Probably because it's a hush state, meaning they want the state to look good. I believe the Mormons want the state to look good, as far as they don't want people to know there's a high suicide rate here.
So if yourself or someone that you knew or loved were having these feelings, would you know where to reach out? Would you know where to find help?
No.
Ultimately, when I was so depressed and I didn't know where to go, I went to our college counselor.
I know the suicide hotline. Actually, Logic has a new song about it, and me and my friends, we love Logic, and one of my friends actually suffered for depression, and he actually would always come over to my house probably like at 2 a.m. and we just sit down and I'd cook him food and stuff, and like we just have a talk on how he's feeling and stuff. Just because I don't want to have someone go through depression like that and be driven to suicide.
I am the U of U student, and I know at the U we have the counseling services. For the first time, it's free, but then after that they're gonna charge you, and I think that could also be a problem when you seek for help and you couldn't afford the help. Then that could be also a problem.
No.
Definitely there needs to be more education on that for sure. Other than Googling maybe a counselor, no, I wouldn't, which is unfortunate.
You know, Bill, we kept hearing embarrassment about suicide, embarrassment to talk about it. And I know when we told people we are going to be doing this, people recoiled, like the idea of you're going to mention suicide on the radio. And I think that's so important and why we're having the conversation today. And Bill and I can pontificate for an hour, but it's better to have guests who know what they're doing. And we'd like to introduce our first panelist for this morning's discussion. Taryn Hyatt is the Utah-Nevada Area Director for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and Kim Meyer is the State Suicide Prevention Coordinator.
Tori Yates is the crisis line supervisor at UNI, the University Neuropsychiatric Institute. So I don't know where we start. Taryn, maybe we'll start with you. What do those folks get right and what do they get wrong?
Well, you know, they got a lot of things right. There is a lot of stigma still surrounding suicide and mental health in general. We don't have this conversation out loud. You know, for millions of people who attempt suicide every single year, and that's millions. This is something that's kept, and when we do share it, we share it in whispers, and that has to change. You know, we do have resources available, and yeah, it's hard for people to identify maybe what those are, and Tori could probably speak more to that here in a moment, but what we want people to know and understand is that suicide is preventable. If you are feeling this way right now, my gosh, you've got to tell somebody, and tell somebody you trust, and tell as many people as you need to until someone takes you serious, because you don't have to have this be your option. You know, there's other things out there, but you need some help to get through whatever it is that you're struggling with right now.
You know, I noticed that a lot of the people kind of danced around it, and then one person there said, well, the Mormons, like it's some big Mormon conspiracy or something. But I mean, religion, when it doesn't matter what the religion is, it's strong in someone's life. I don't know of a single religion in the Western world, certainly, that condones suicide. And as a matter of fact, they all really condemn it, and it's a mortal sin. How would people deal with that? Who wants to address that?
Well, I think that one of the things that we have to be really careful of, no matter what sort of cultural taboos or, you know, topics, how we think about it, is we have to take the shame out of it. People feel so much shame already when they're thinking about suicide, like they failed or they are weak, and that's just not true. This is just something that sometimes happens when, you know, the combination of like brain chemicals go wrong and life sucks. But it doesn't have to stay that way forever. But we have to take the shame out of it, and that includes whether or not we think of it as a sin or not. We still have to take the shame away, because that drives people into a darker and darker place, and it's just not useful in prevention.
How can we get them? I mean, the medical profession is in certain ways complicit in this. You think nothing about going to a doctor if you have some sort of a bad flu or something like that. But if you're having a mental health issue, you don't, and insurance companies don't encourage you to go deal with your mental health issues either. What do we do about that?
Well, I think that's where we got to just start having frank, honest conversations about our brain. I mean, my God, this is the organ that is responsible for everything we do. My heart doesn't beat if my brain doesn't tell it to. My lungs don't take a breath if my brain doesn't tell it to. So maybe we quit calling it mental health. This is brain health. Our brains are responsible for so much, yet we don't give it the care and attention it needs. And you're right, yeah, I'll go see a doctor if I have a cold or my heart's struggling, but we think that there's something weak in us, or man, I should be able to manage. Why am I not capable of coping with what's in front of me? There shouldn't be any shame associated with us getting care for our brains the same way we do other organs.
So we talk about that with the brain, but so we're having the conversation. We're doing that much right now,
Yeah.
but what's next? Because people are having those feelings right now. Tori, if someone is, what do you do? Do you sit there in a corner at home? Do you
talk about the crisis line?
Yeah.
And what the,
A lot of them actually do sit in the corner because they don't know where to go. And so the biggest thing is reaching out. And they can call the crisis line. So the local number is 801-587-3000. That goes directly to our crisis staff up at the U. They can call through the National Lifeline number. That number also comes to us, so you can get local resources.
That's interesting. I think that's important. You're not talking to somebody in Chicago or New
No.
Jersey or New York. You will talk to somebody here.
Right, you're calling Utah. When you call us, it's routed by your area code, so it comes to us. We can get you local resources. That number is 800-273-8255. And if you don't want to talk to somebody on the phone, we also have an app. So you can go to your Google Play Store or to the Apple Store and download it. It's called Safe UT.
Yeah, we'll be talking about
Yep.
that coming up. We've got a whole segment about that
Right.
app. How do we get people to, I guess just by doing this, get people to talk about this more? We're having a walk at Liberty Park tomorrow, the Out of the Darkness walk. That grows. That must be very encouraging to see how much that grows and how many people come to that.
Exponentially. You know, I mean, we have close to 4,000 people coming out. The fact that we are coming out and talking about suicide, come see that you are not alone. Because that's the lie of depression. When you're in that moment, you truly believe nobody else understands. Everybody would be better off. Come see that that's not true. Your life does matter, and you're needed here. You know, if you're feeling that lie, call the crisis line, tell somebody. Because as soon as you start talking about whatever's going on, we can help you start to work through that. You don't have to figure it out all by yourself.
Yeah, Kim.
And I think the other piece is, you know, the way that we have the conversation, but we also need to hear the stories of recovery, because we associate suicide almost entirely with death, but the reality is most people who struggle with thoughts of suicide, most people who have suicide attempts go on to live and to recover and to have meaningful experience, to have joy, to, you know, live life. And so we really need to hear those stories so that people know there is a way through it, and we know for so many there is a way through it.
You know, that's something I don't think we address enough, and I don't think we even thought to address it on this panel today, is talk to people who have attempted suicide and recovered and said, this is what my life is now.
You're
and
talking to one right now. If I would have died all those times I tried, I would not be experiencing the joy and the gifts that my life is today. So please, if you've been there, know that it gets better. It gets better.
help it get out of the darkness?
Yes, out of the darkness. Let's talk about it.
And join us tomorrow, everybody watching this, listening to it. Show up at Liberty Park tomorrow at 9:30. You can come and register and walk. If you want to walk in memory of someone, you can. If you just want to come and experience it sounds like it's really somber, and it's not.
It's a fun day.
We have a lot of fun.
It is fun, which is weird to say, but it should be that way.
So join us there. I want to thank all of you for being with us. We have to take a little break now and bring up some new panelists.
Yep.
And we'll do that and be right back. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
I'm Missy Larson, and today I'm a senior director at doTERRA. doTERRA means gift of the earth, and the Utah-based company offers the safest, purest, and most beneficial essential oils available in the world. Essential oils have been used throughout history in many cultures for their medicinal and therapeutic values. doTERRA humbly supports the Out of Darkness campaign and urges everybody to download Safe UT today. And if you are ever in crisis, please use it.
Bullying has often been linked to suicide. And with us to discuss the issue of bullying is Pam Hayes. She's the executive director of the Anti-Bullying Coalition, and also David Mossberg, who is director of programs for the coalition.
And this man right here is one of our colleagues at Broadway Media. His name is Jackson Carter. He has experienced bullying firsthand, and I mentioned at the beginning that it is a nightmare for me as a father, knowing that my kids are growing up into an era of social media and bullying. And Jackson, when you were growing up, was it through social media? Were you seeing it firsthand?
No, I didn't have any experience with social media. I was born a little too early for that one. But I actually grew up on a Native American reservation. I was one of the only white kids in an all-Native school. Yeah, I know, you would never think it. I'm very, very pasty. But I was different. And you don't really, you can't explain to a kid what difference is. You can go into class, you can go into race later, but a little kid doesn't understand what makes them different. And so I got rocks thrown at me and names called and all that fun stuff. So I'd go home crying to my mom, I don't have any friends. Why don't these kids like me? I dreaded going to school, pretended to be sick.
Did you ever get this, why don't you stand up to those bullies talk?
Oh, I do now. Yeah.
It's hard as a kid, though, to stand up.
Absolutely.
You just want to be, you so badly want to be liked.
You duck your head, you keep to yourself, you don't want to be a target. And the problem is, you want to believe that other kids are going to stand up for those kids. But they join the herd because otherwise they're targets too. So after a lot of that, my parents solved things the way that we solve things in America. We ate and we laughed. So, we'd go rent a movie and we'd get a bunch of candy, and that fixed it. And it fixed it for a little while. And then I started self-medicating with food and got really heavy. And at my heaviest, I was 340 pounds almost. So, easier target, bigger target.
Did you ever contemplate suicide because of all of this?
Many times.
And I'll get personal. Did you attempt?
I remember when I was probably 8, as young as 8 or 9, I was wrapping strings from jackets around my neck and falling asleep with them, just hoping that they would tighten while I was asleep. And
at 8 years old, you were hoping you would rather be done than to go to school the next day.
Let's talk to David Mossberg from the Anti-Bullying Coalition. It's probably, excuse me, Jackson, a pretty typical story. You've heard it a lot of times. How do you address these things?
It's incredibly impactful. And I think saying it out loud is how we address this, and we get it out in the open. Specifically with suicide and bullying in schools.
Hold the microphone up here.
We really need to address the bullying in schools because we know that victims of bullying are much more likely to experience depression, much more likely to experience anxiety. We even know that there are consequences for bullies with regard to increased rates of depression and anxiety.
But let's talk about Jackson. He goes home to his family, he goes, kids are throwing rocks at me, kids are making fun of me, and they say, well, let's have a lasagna, let's eat and then laugh and watch a comedy.
Right.
What can a parent do when because all you want to do as a parent is hold your child and say it's going to be okay and pray that it is.
Absolutely, and I want to support my kids, and I want them to go to a school that's safe, and I don't want them to experience any pain or hurt. And parents and teachers and administrators really need to work together to target bullying and to reduce bullying in our schools. And parents need to have the conversations with teachers, and teachers need to have the conversations with students. And again, it needs to be brought out in the open, in the classrooms, and in the school communities to reduce bullying and to prevent kids really from experiencing those
Pam,
really
what is
traumatic things.
what is the Anti-Bullying Coalition? How do you guys address all of that? How do you interact with people?
So we start working with the children and empowering them, giving them the self-confidence to stand up to the bully. The bully's hurting too. The bully is not a bad kid. This child may have some things going on at home
Oh, the one who
or at
bullied
school.
me was a bad kid. He was really bad.
You never know. There could be something tied behind them. So we want to give them the self-confidence to be able to stand up to that person. And we talk to them. You got to report it. You got to stand up and stay calm. So if you are being bullied, the first thing they want is a reaction. So if you respond and they've won. And a lot of people will say a bully is like a comedian. If they don't have an audience, they move on.
You said something there that struck a chord, and that is report it. Did you ever report to the school officials that you were being bullied?
Never to the school officials. It wasn't safe for me to go to the principal about it. I figured my parents would know the best course of action. You always assume your parents know best, so that's who you go to. And unfortunately, a lot of parents aren't equipped to understand these issues, and they don't understand the real long-term impact of these things, because they grew up and they were probably picked on and did some picking on, and they don't realize what needs to be done in order to prevent something as horrible as a suicide.
Does the Anti-Bullying Coalition, do you work with school officials so that they know how to deal with it when kids come and say, I'm being bullied?
We do. We work with schools, we work with parents and students. So parents don't know. It doesn't come with a handbook when you become a parent. So we try to provide them the tools to walk them through on how to get help. And then we also do lessons with the parents to teach the child empathy and how to grow and empower them so that they can speak up.
David, is there any such thing as kids being kids? You hear that from parents from time to time when there is, that's just part of middle school. That's kids being kids. It's part of the process. I mean, do we leave it there as kids being kids, or do these parents need to step up and call the school administrator?
So there's a difference between kids being kids and bullying, right? And some of the things that really differentiate bullying are, it's a behavior that's really repeated over time. Okay, and one of the most important components of it is that there's a significant power differential between the bully and the child who is being bullied, right? And so we've got kids who are older. We've got in your case, we've got a kid who's really very different race, yeah, right? And as a minority in a school, yeah. So there's a power differential here that's not kids being kids. So bullying is something very different than just kids not getting along or kids not being friends, or I talked to Bill and he doesn't want to be my friend, and how do I deal with that? Well, Bill's not bullying me. That's a normal social interaction.
Well,
right?
let's talk a little bit about how kids who are different in perhaps their sexual orientation, and it's obvious to other kids in the school. That's become a big thing, and it's an aspect of bullying.
Absolutely, yeah. The LGBT community, is much more likely to experience bullying in schools,
even as adults.
Absolutely,
yeah. Adults, gay people get bullied all the time.
Absolutely, and it's not something that's specific to kids. I mean, we experience bullying in the workplace.
Pam, we've talked a lot about the children being bullied. What about the parents of the bullies? At what point do they step in? How do we make them recognize this is an issue that needs to start with you as the parent to stop the bullying from happening?
So we've been working with school districts across the state, and we do parent trainings, and they'll invite some of their parents of the children who are the bully. And they also, at the schools, will start working with them as well, because there's underlying issues usually with most of those children. They're looking for power. They're looking for some control in their life, and we want to give it to them. So we will work with the schools, the parents, and help them with that bully as well.
I hate to ask you for statistics off the top of your head, and you probably can't, but is there any indication as to how many suicides are the result of bullying, of somebody being bullied? Do we know that?
I know that on average 1 in 5 students will experience bullying. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many of those students, those 1 in 5 who experience bullying in schools, then go on to consider or attempt suicide or complete suicide.
Jackson, how did you end the cycle? You were
That's what I was going to. You've become a pretty confident, out there, in your face kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I actually ended up going to a charter school, an art school up in Ogden, where I found my people. Like, I found my clique, and I suddenly went from being the least popular kid in school to one of the most popular. They even voted me prom queen senior year. Thank you. Yeah, that really helped, was finding my crowd. And if there's anybody listening right now who's experiencing bullying, I do want to say you'll find your crowd. You will find who you are supposed to be with. You will run in the right circle. It may not happen right now, it may not happen tomorrow, but it will happen one day. And when it does, you're going to flourish. But you have to hang on until then.
Well, and you took other steps to try and gain your self-confidence, though. I just recall, somebody said to me the other day, you interviewed Jackson a long time ago, and you don't even remember it. And I thought, I did? Really? Yeah. And just today I was remembering why I interviewed you.
Yeah, that was the Sister Dottie event up at the Outreach Resource Center in Ogden. When I was 14, I came out as gay, and that was really hard in middle school. I kept it very much to myself. Went to art school, and all of a sudden, hey, I found my people. But there's an after-school program up in Ogden called Outreach, and I saw confident gay adults. And that was something I had never seen in my life before, because you see all the sob stories, you see all the rejected kids coming out. You never see a well-adjusted, confident gay man, at least at that time. Now they're, dime a dozen. I'm basic now. Yeah. I'm super basic.
You're just one of the herd.
Yeah, it's fine. That's how I like it.
So, David, let's do a plan of action for parents listening right now and driving in to work, or maybe they're sitting at their cubicle and listening to us on Facebook. What can a parent do today when they get home to help their kids fight bullying, or even to see if they are being bullied in the first place?
Absolutely. Parents, ask your kids. Talk to your kids about bullying. Is it happening? Do you see it happening? How do you manage it? Is it happening to you? And then, what are we going to do about it? Right? What are we going to do about it? And how do we increase our kids' ability to manage bullying, increase empathy in our schools, and increase the compassion that our kids have for one another, and parents being able and feeling empowered to talk to their kids about bullying, and to also talk to the administration in the school and the teachers about bullying as well.
What do you do if you find out your kid's a bully?
I think if you find out your kid's a bully, how do you manage that, right? And how do you teach your child the empathy and compassion that they need to understand how their actions affect others, right? And if they think they're just teasing and they're just having fun and it's just a game, and maybe the victim likes it in their eyes, right? We've got some behavioral patterns here that are really unhealthy. Well, increasing empathy is one extraordinarily effective way for kids to understand what someone else might be feeling as a result of their actions.
Pam, you wanted to add something?
So at the Anti-Bullying Coalition, we have our app, the Stand for Kind app, where parents can go on and get resources, and we have videos and links, and we'll actually have our tip line too that will give them step-by-step instructions to help if their child is the bully or the victim.
And again, how do they find all that?
It's on our website, or they go stand the number 4 kind.
And Jackson,
yeah,
I think you stand as an example now to people who might be in your position the way. Do you talk to groups about this?
I do regularly. I've done schools, I've traveled the country. After I was a contestant on The Biggest Loser, I had the opportunity to travel the country and give lots of talks.
Now, see, you left that out. I think the Biggest Loser, Jackson lost a lot of weight on that TV show.
See, and you'd think that would fix the confidence issues. That's what I thought too. Once I lost the weight, I'd be great. But there's a whole mental health piece behind that, or brain health piece behind that you still have to work on the emotional aspect of everything. It's not just a physical transformation. And so I talk a lot about that in my presentations that I give to schools.
It goes all back to communicating and talking and starting the conversation today when the kids get home, or to your kids who maybe are adults. Call them and check on them. And that's what we're trying to do here today.
Thanks, you guys. We've been talking with David Mossberg, Director of Programs for the Anti-Bullying Coalition, also Pam Hayes, Executive Director, and our colleague and a guy I interviewed a long time ago and then totally forgot about.
It's all good.
Jackson Carter, thanks a lot. We still have a lot to cover. When we come back, we'll be talking about families who have lost someone to suicide, how to help someone who might be suicidal, and how to help families cope with loss of that. All right? We'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone has
Thanks
a
so
role
much.
to play in preventing suicide. We at Stand for Kind and the Anti-Bullying Coalition would like to thank Broadway Media for getting the conversation started. The Anti-Bullying Coalition has a lot of ways to get you involved. With your help, we can change the misunderstanding about suicide. Anti-Bullying Coalition provides tools and programs to schools at no cost that reduce bullying and provide students support. Please download our app at Stand for Kind.
In Utah, suicide is now the leading cause of death for kids between 10 and 17 years old. Raising awareness about mental health and suicide is just one of the ways we can stop the recent increase in suicides in our schools and in our communities. Everybody's important, and everybody matters. If you or someone you know needs help, go to antibullying.org.
And I'll remind you all that if you, the people who are listening to this on radio or watching a live stream, if you have any questions, you can email them in to the various radio station websites or put questions on the Facebook page, and we'll try to get to them, some of them at the end of this show, toward the end of the show. And if we don't get to them, we'll try and make sure that somebody responds to you after the show. So when some listeners became aware that we were doing this program here at Broadway Media on suicide, we got a letter that they wanted us to share. A listener wanted us to share. Now, we've admitted the names of the people involved, even though they were very upfront about who they were, and they put their names, but just decided to omit the names. Here's a letter that was shared with us at X96. I'm sharing brutal news via email. Please forgive me for that. There's not time and space right now for me to talk to everybody who cares. For that, I am sorry. I also can't say the words over and over, as what happened still doesn't seem real. My youngest son committed suicide Sunday night, and that's the way she wrote it, committed suicide, but died as a result of suicide. He died by suicide at 9:30 p.m. He texted me at 9:19 saying, I love you, and I thought it was just to start him wanting a ride home or a late-night McDonald's run. There are 1,000 questions that I don't think we'll ever have an answer to. He's gone and never coming back. He didn't let on that he was hurting in any way. He didn't tell us he was sad. He didn't tell us he was mad. He was getting signed up for private driver's education. We booked him a ticket to New York so he could go spend his 16th birthday on a long weekend with his sister. He has a car waiting for him, a debit card with funds in it. He has great friends, straight A's, parents, family who love him dearly. He was healthy. He didn't eat too much sugar because it made him break out. He, by all accounts, had a good life, and still he made the choice to end his life. I can't get my heart or head around that. Maybe I never will. He had a fun day at home with his sister and I. He whitened his teeth, he mowed the lawn, he played with cats and played with the dog. He asked me for a new razor. He did a silly thing putting his arms and legs into a sweatshirt and then walking around on the ground. He left around 8 saying he was going to his friends, and then he never came back. He left notes for us and for his friends. His note to my husband and I were for his funeral plans. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. I can't make any sense of it at all. Please hug your babies one extra time for me, for all the parents who know the loss of a child. My big wish is for all of us to express ourselves, to get the sad, the mad, the hurt, the loneliness on the outside. My son is a raw, real, excruciating example that holding things in can only cause more pain. He made a choice that I can't undo with all the love of a mother's heart. Whatever led him to pull the trigger was hidden under a tall, handsome kid, funny, bright, generous. He didn't give us the chance to help. He didn't show anyone his pain. That I will have to find a way to live with.
After that letter came out on X96, there was a letter in response to that one. We also admitted the names. I heard you talking about a letter from a mother who lost her son to suicide. She indicated that her son was happy and well adjusted. This is a scary, sad fact. My child is happy, outgoing, well liked at school, active, participates in extracurricular activities, no warning signs. My wife and I found out a few months ago, after a suicide attempt, that it was not our child's first attempt. We are working with our child and a therapist to address the underlying issues. My point is there are not always warning signs. My child was under the impression that it was bad or wrong to not be okay. The original issues were compounded by the exhaustion of acting okay all the time. The few times the mask slipped a little and there was an outburst of some kind, we all marked it as a teen hormone change and just moved on with life. The sad thing is, when my child showed any small sign of physical issue, fever, slight limp, a grunt, I would badger my child until they told me what was going on, and off to the doctor we'd go. My wife and I are still in the process of trying to shift our thought process to be as aggressive about mental health signs as we've been about physical health. If this information can shed a little more light on the issue, I hope you're able to weave our thread into the greater conversation. Please help dispel the stigma that surrounds mental health.
So here to talk about how families can perhaps intervene, how they can deal with loss, is Emily Horner. Emily is one of the founding members of the National Association for Suicide Prevention, and she knows this kind of pain firsthand.
I do. I lost my brother, Jed, in 2009 to suicide, and before that, I really didn't know about suicide. I knew people who had died by suicide, but I didn't know nearly the things that I know now. And I wish I had. I wish that I didn't wait for it to affect me before I learned about it.
Both of these letters seem to indicate that the parents, the families didn't have really a lot of warning signs. I mean, you always hear there are always warning signs, but they didn't seem to see it. Is that common?
It is common. It's a fact that family members will not tell their family members. They will tell a close friend, they'll tell a confidant, a teacher, maybe a counselor, someone at work, but they don't tell their family. Because as families, we want to fix things. That's what we do. And they're scared. They're scared of what the outcome might be. They're scared of what we might do or how we might judge them. And, you know, we all have things of our own to worry about, and they don't want to add to that stress. But if they knew that we would drop anything and do anything for them, ever, that I think that would change their mind.
The letter that Bill read and the mother's pain in that letter, not recognizing any of the signs or hearing of any of the signs, and then to lose her son, and now there's this family left to pick up the pieces. You've actually experienced having to kind of pick up the pieces yourself.
I have. I remember sitting on the couch that day and people were going to work and, you know, walking down the street, and I thought, how can they just go on? My life, my world ended. And I don't know how people are just going on. But somehow I kept breathing and kept going on. And within a few months, I found the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and an Out of the Darkness walk. And I learned that people like me are out there. There are other survivors. There are people who understand and get where I was. They understand the grief. It's a completely different kind of grief than any other kind of loss. And they get it, and they understand, and you can talk about it, and you can talk about your loved one. Sometimes when you lose a family member, people are afraid to talk about your loved one. They don't want to make you cry. They don't want to make you sad. But that's the opposite of what we want. And tears are fine. Tears are good. Tears are cleansing and healing. So it's okay to cry when we talk about our family members.
I know that when my brother died as a result of suicide, my mother, who's not alive anymore now, but devastated her. She never forgave herself, and she thought it was her fault that happened. You know, she blamed herself for all the things that she had done wrong in to raising him, all the bad mistakes she'd made, you know, and on and on and on and on. How do you get over that? How do you counsel people about that?
You don't ever get over it. The guilt and the just the question of why never goes away, but you get through it. So you don't get over it. You never heal all the way, but you heal partially. So you'll always have a scar. But learning to cope through things and learning that there are others and that there isn't anything that you could do. Because if you could have, they would still be here.
We've used the words, sad and guilt. Is it okay to feel anger?
Absolutely. Yep. A lot of people feel angry towards the people that they've lost, and that's totally fine. That's a normal piece of grief.
I feel like it's such a cycle. You feel angry, and then you feel guilty for feeling angry. Then you're sad, and then you just keep going, and it's horrific.
I felt guilty when I laughed. When the first time that we laughed and that we were joking, I was like, why am I need to be crying. This isn't okay. But it's totally okay to laugh and have great memories and remember the jerk times when my brother was a big jerk and did rotten things to me.
I remember my brother Noel. He was such a gadfly. He was this opinionated politics all of the time. Politics, and this and that. And then he'd pick at people about politics. And I thought, how is it that you could take your own life right before the election? You're missing the good stuff here. You're missing a chance to, I said that to my sister, who was very, very sad, and she was like crying, and she started to laugh, and I said, I'm right.
You're totally right. And the things that we had planned for our futures with them have to change. And that's why I love being involved and being able to speak about it, because I get to have him live through me, and I get to still talk and tell stories about him and remember him. And then I get to help other family members who have lost somebody or a friend or someone to learn how to cope and know that it's okay.
I feel like a theme that was in both the letter Bill read and the letter I read was, it's okay to be not okay.
I say that 1,000 times a day. It's totally okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not talk about it.
Right.
So tell somebody, I'm not okay today. Maybe not the cashier at the grocery store when she's like, hey, how are you today? But someone that you're close to, maybe a coworker or a friend or a family member, tell the truth.
And I want to touch on this one more time, too. It's okay to be angry, too. It's because in a way, suicide is a very selfish thing in that, you're going to you think you're going to put yourself out of your misery, but you're not considering the people you leave behind.
You cannot be in your right mind, and they don't think that clearly. They don't think through, because honestly, you can't. I have said for the last 8.5 years that it's brave. I'm not brave enough to die by suicide. I'm not, and it's scary, and you have to be in a very, very dark place to be able to even contemplate that and then follow through. I don't think it's selfish. I think that they think they're helping us, and they're taking themselves out of the problem equation. They're not adding to our already burdensome life, and I think that they think they're doing us a favor.
Let's talk a little bit quickly about the Out of the Darkness walk. It's tomorrow at Liberty Park. People can just show up at 9:30 and register. And it is do you know how many people did we have there last year? Do you remember?
We had close to 5,000 last year. We're expecting probably close to 6,000 this year.
It's 6,000 people that you can come. So if you've lost a family member to suicide, and you're just come there by yourself, even you will find so much. So many people to talk about it with you and help you with it. And it's not a somber event. It's a great event.
It's not somber. And actually, there are tears. There are tears of joy and tears of sorrow. And we do have a memory section where you can bring a photo or something from your loved one and remember them and talk about them. And for often, it's the first time that people are allowed to talk about them after they died.
And you talked about how you felt guilty the first time you laughed. This is what you got to do. We got to still live our life and have fun and remember the good times.
We do, and that's so important to healing and just getting through. And at first, you can't imagine it, but then it happens, and a year goes by, and another year goes by, and then you're able to look back a little bit and say, okay, I've come. And then there are days that you are still really struggling and angry, and that's okay too.
I'm sorry, what was your brother's name?
My brother was Jed Arviseth.
Jed?
Jed, yep.
Emily, thanks a lot for taking some time with us. We'll see you tomorrow at Liberty Park. Emily Horner, she's with the National Association for Suicide Prevention. Are you really a founding member?
I am a founding member, and it's the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Your
Why do I
notes
keep
are-
saying the National?
I don't know. But yes, Taryn Aiken.
I've only done the walk with you guys for what, 6 years or something like that.
Taryn Aiken, Hyatt, Mary Lou Arveseth, my mom, and I are the 3 founding members that are still on the board, and we're going strong.
And the details are on the Facebook page if you're watching right now on any of the Facebook streams on your radio station.
Next, we're going to talk about a new tool for the fight against suicide. We have to take a break. Thanks.
Hi, this is Jay Francis, president of Larry H. Miller Charities, representing the Larry H. Miller companies and the thousands of Utah employees. We applaud Broadway Media and their 7 radio stations for taking valuable airtime to remind all of us how precious and important each life is. Suicide is a tough subject and takes too many from us too soon and unnecessarily. And many of us find ourselves saying, if only I had. Well, from Larry H. Miller Charities, we'd like to remind you that today is your if only day. Who needs your handshake? Who needs your hug, a phone call, a visit, or a compliment? Think about it. We can make a difference. Today's program will share some resources for all of us to be aware of. We never know when we may need to help a friend, a brother, sister, or even a spouse. We know life can be challenging and a little bumpy at times. On behalf of Larry H. Miller Charities, we want everyone to know you matter and that you are loved.
Joining us now is Spencer Cox, the Lieutenant Governor for the state of Utah, Sean Reyes, the Utah State Attorney General, also Kathy Davis, a suicide prevention specialist who works with the Utah State School Board, and also Missy Larson, who is the chair of the Safe Utah Commission?
The Safe UT Commission.
Safe UT Commission. So how is the state, Lieutenant Governor Cox, how is the state responding to really what is an epidemic?
It is an epidemic, and it's growing, and not just here in Utah, across the United States, and that's what's most troubling. And so we're responding in lots of different ways, and I know Sean's going to talk about some of those as well, but we just completed what was called the Crisis Line Commission Task Force, and this was put together specifically to come up with new recommendations on how the state can do more and better. And one of those recommendations that we're working on at a national level is to get a 3-digit dialing number for crisis hotline, 311, similar to 911, something like that. In the meantime, what we're going to do here in the state of Utah is consolidate all of the numbers. Every county has a different number. A lot of these numbers aren't staffed the way they should be appropriately, especially in rural Utah where I'm from, where this is a big deal and a big problem, and try to get more resources out there for our local crisis teams so that a live person is answering the phone every time someone calls, and there's one number for everyone in the state.
As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state of Utah, Sean, how do you, Mr. Reyes, how do you respond to these things?
I'm still trying to recover from the letter that you read the last segment and that mother, and I hear those stories and I'm just so sad. And we have seen so many of those, listened to those stories up and down the state of Utah. I'm glad that you're doing this and that it's called Out of Darkness, because far too many of our friends and family have been in the darkness of depression, addiction, victimization, of bullying, of sexual exploitation, and for years they felt like there's nowhere to turn. And they're in this darkness not because they're weak or because they're bad or evil or lazy. And as we deal with these things, we see finally some light. I think if there is a light of hope, it's that people are waking up around the state, thanks in part to great partners like Broadway Media for shedding light on this and bringing some light into their lives. Lieutenant Governor Cox mentioned this 311 line. That's going to be game-changing for people. Utah is taking the lead in the United States to let people have something 911 everybody knows about, but this would be for behavioral health, mental illness, and Missy's going to talk about Safe UT. The first time in 10 years that the numbers for deaths by suicide for ages 10 through 17 actually plateaued or went down was last year. So after exponential growth for 7 to 10 years, we now see finally we're seeing some of those numbers start to come down because of what everyone who's been here is doing.
That's what I was going to. Is it because we're finally talking about it?
We're being honest. We're not judging as much. We're saying it's okay to come out and talk about it. We're saying there are resources. They've been there, but a lot of people haven't realized that they're there, and we're creating new resources.
Let's talk about the resources. Kathy, you work with the state school board on this issue, suicide prevention. What do you do in that regard?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, all of you, that we've just started opening this conversation and talking about the night side of being human and waiting for the sun, because the sun always rises. But when you're in the depths of depression, you don't know that, and especially our young people. So I represent the Utah State Board of Education, and I'm honored to be able to be boots on the ground for this cause. I am all over the state, and I can honestly tell you that the stories are heartbreaking. And one of the resources that we have is one of our partnerships with the Attorney General's office. We've had several wonderful legislations that have happened just since I've been boots on the ground for the past 4 years. But Safe UT is technical assistance for mental health crises. You know, my computer always breaks down, and I always make sure I have someone that can help me. And they tell me it's not just Control-Alt-Delete. There's other things that you need to do, Kathy. And the fact of the matter is, our kids are dealing with some really tough situations. They're hooked into social media 24/7, and they need to talk to somebody and reach out and know that they have help. And the Safe UT line, and Tori mentioned the number, it is 1-800-273-8255. But better yet, it's an app that they just have to plug in, and it's intuitive, and they can chat, text, get help from licensed clinicians.
Kathy keeps saying boots on the ground. I think it's interesting because she's wearing cowboy boots that you can't see.
Absolutely.
But Missy, talk about the app a little bit, the Safe UT app. It's bullying and other things, right?
Yes, well, it's anything. Anybody in crisis can download this app. So you go to either the Google Store or the Apple Store, download it. It's free. It's free support on the back end. So everything about it is free. It's confidential. It's you just have to reach out, and there's support, there's help on the other side of that. Years ago, when we were looking at, from the Attorney General's office, under the direction of Sean, we were looking at ways to support and help kids be safe. And when it really came down to it, this was the #1 crisis that we were looking at. Kids should not die by suicide because they will grow up and they will find that joy in life, but sometimes as a kid it feels like that period in their life will never end. And so this is something they can reach out immediately on. And the other thing is that us as a community are finally getting together. Business is working with nonprofit and government to come together in a wonderful triangle to support not only the kids but also the older populations. Suicide is not just a youth phenomenon.
We feel horrible about that because they're so young, but a lot of very old people also.
Or a vet community, losing 20 to 29 vets a day across the nation.
Yes, Lieutenant Governor, Did you have something you want to say about that?
Well, no, I think the numbers are really staggering, and it's important for people to understand the numbers. In 2015, we did a study right here in the state of Utah. 25% of kids, these are kids ages 10 to 17, 25% of them are experiencing sadness or loneliness or a lack of hopelessness. 16% of those, so think of that, in a class of 30 kids, 6 of those kids are having serious thoughts about suicide. 13% of those, so about 4 in a class of 30, actually have a suicide plan. And it's chilling to think about those numbers and to understand. And so this bringing it into like having the conversation, we can't emphasize that enough. A year ago, I met with a group that was struggling, and we were talking about suicide. And I just realized I hadn't had that conversation with my own kids. I was a victim of bullying when I was a kid. I had suicidal thoughts when I was a kid. I went through this. So I went down in my boys' room, and we had that conversation. I'm so glad I did that. I think they're doing okay. I hope they're doing okay. But that can't just be a one-time thing. We've got to continue to have these conversations.
Listen, we want to address some questions. You guys can just stay right here. John, you want to go down there? We've got, how much time do we have left in the whole program? About
5 minutes.
5 minutes, thank you. So these are questions that have come in through Facebook and our various radio station websites. And whoever wants to address it will let you, or here on the stage. What coping skills can we teach young adults to help them from choosing suicide? How we impress upon them the magnitude of choosing to do that? What coping skills are there? Like Taryn.
I think one of the best ones is teaching our kids to be mindful, teaching them to stay present, teaching them that it's okay to again, speak up. They have to tell us what's going on in their brain. I have a young daughter who, after going through a tremendous breakup, said, Mom, I'm thinking about crashing the car. And she said that because in her mind, that was the way she got rid of the pain, versus telling me, wow, I'm hurting, and now we can talk about other ways. So just helping them know it's okay to speak up, but gosh, stay present, find something to focus on, breathe. Just that staying in today and where they have power, I think, is one of the best things we could teach them.
Then at what age should we start talking to kids about this? You work with the schools. What, from kindergarten on up, do you start there?
I think what we need to do is exactly what Taryn is saying, is be here now with your kids and let them realize that life is a struggle. And so what that looks like for younger kids is giving them tools of resiliency, the tools that they can bounce back. I was just doing an elementary, middle school assembly yesterday, and I taught them mindfulness, exactly what she's saying. Just realize that the pain ends, and that when I talk to parents, I always say, let your kids know where they live in your hearts. Let them know, because the parents say, oh, they know how I feel. I say, oh no, you've got to have those difficult conversations. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's what's hard for kids. It's hard for us.
I'll ask this question on my own. Is there a way to tell the difference between being just a moody, 13, 14-year-old, 12-year-old boy or girl, a way to tell the difference between that and somebody who's really contemplating taking their own life?
I mean, the best way to know if somebody's thinking about taking their own life is ask them. We have no magic tools at this point to say, we can't draw someone's blood and say, maybe in the future we will, but right now we have to ask. And it sort of doesn't matter if you just have a moody teenager or otherwise, you should be having those conversations probably anyway. So what is going on in your life? What is making you feel this way? How are you coping? All of those things need to be a consistent conversation, and asking if somebody's thinking about suicide should be part of that.
Wouldn't it be fascinating if someday, that there are sort of more scientific and medical, you said drawing blood, more scientific and medical predictors perhaps of this stuff. Yeah, Sean, you want to make
I totally agree on your last question, Bill, with what was just said about predicting. There are also some circumstances that help us understand when kids are more in crisis or more likely to be in crisis. Loss of a parent or loved one during divorce, moving, all of those things can contribute. But like the woman said in her letter, even on the surface, kids who look well-adjusted, who have a perfect life, are still at risk, and so you never really know. But those things I think parents should be mindful of when their kids, if they're bullied, if they're victims, if they're going through other types of things. There are those factors.
I think what that brings up again is don't assume just because your child seems fine that he or she is fine.
You've got to talk to him.
Talk to them about this kind of thing, as you would talk to them about proper nutrition, as you would talk to them about getting enough exercise, as you would talk to them about sexual health, as you would talk to them about any of those topics. You can talk to them about that.
Share emotions.
Yeah.
And Bill, I wouldn't say it's just kids. I would say family members. If somebody is going through a change, a divorce, things like that, ask our brothers and sisters, ask our parents, are you thinking about this, and do you need help?
Yeah, no, and sometimes it can be comforting to know that it's simply sometimes a chemical imbalance. I remember my mother, when I was pretty young, she apparently attempted to take her own life. And why? Well, nobody knew, and she didn't know why. She went to the doctor and he said, my God, your, I don't know what levels are so low. It was a hormone level that was just a chemical thing that was just, so there's that as well. So take care of your health in all aspects. Yeah. I think we're out of time, or pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But if you still have questions, you can go onto our Facebook page, any of the Facebook pages for any of the station that you might be listening to right now. Comment below, and one of us over the next few hours will try to respond to you so we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, just remember, whatever you do, don't be afraid or ashamed to talk to somebody. The only way we will beat this public health crisis is to bring it out into the open. And join us tomorrow at Liberty Park, 9:30, the Out of the Darkness Walk. When this comes out of the darkness, that's when it will end. Broadway Media thanks you. Thanks to all the panelists. Thanks to everybody listening and watching at home. I'm Bill Allred.
I'm John Watkins.
See ya.